My legitimate elder sister was originally the greatest beauty in the capital, but she was born simple-minded. Yet on the day my husband ascended the throne, he personally issued the decree to make her his empress.
The world and human hearts change easily, but only Ying'er remains forever pure.
He met my sister only once, and completely forgot the 5 years I spent exhausting my mind for him, planning every step of his way. He let my foolish, simple-minded sister step on my back to ascend the imperial throne. He despised me for being calculating, yet demanded that I secretly manage the imperial harem on her behalf.
Ying'er is simple-minded and cannot scheme against others. You, however, are well practiced in it.
Until my son suddenly came down with a high fever, and I knelt in the pouring rain, banging on the doors of Jiaofeng Palace for half the night, yet failed to summon a single imperial physician. In the end, my tiny child, while I held him in my arms trying to break out of the palace gates to seek a doctor, convulsed and took his last breath in my embrace. My devotion was misplaced. I was willing to accept my loss, but I was not born to be cheap and lowly. A mere man is not worth me being trampled to this extent. When Xuan'er's fever began, dusk had just fallen. I sent someone to summon an imperial physician, but by the time the second watch of the night approached, no one had returned.
Your ladyship, if the fever continues like this, it might damage his brain.
After the wet nurse finished speaking, she hurriedly went to soak a cloth in cold water again. Looking at Xuan'er's flushed, burning face, I could wait no longer. I instructed the wet nurse to look after him carefully and led my attendants out of Changle Palace. I wanted to see for myself why the imperial physicians were so hard to summon today. Chen Shang, whom I had sent earlier to summon a physician, was covered in sweat, with blood dripping from her forehead. With a thud, she fell to her knees, blocking my path on the palace walkway.
Your ladyship, all the imperial physicians have been summoned to Jiaofeng Palace. I kowtowed until my forehead bled, but I couldn't even get to see Nanny Wang, who serves the Empress. Yin Chao even said through the gate that no matter how grand an issue our Changle Palace has, could never compare to the Empress.
I smiled bitterly. Is the Empress sick? Why did all the imperial physicians have to go to the Jiaofeng Palace? Chengshang burst into tears with a sob.
The Empress felt some palpitations and unease this evening. The Emperor ordered all the imperial physicians on duty tonight to watch over her, to ensure the Empress gets a good night's sleep.
So it truly was love at first sight. She was the precious pearl he held in his hand, doted on and protected. Ignoring the bitterness in my heart, I sent Chengshang back to tend to her wound and rest, and hurried toward the Jiaofeng Palace. My elder sister, Jiang Shuying, was born with intellectual disabilities. My father and stepmother did not want her to see outsiders, so they told the world that a traveling Taoist priest had cast a fortune for her at birth, saying that the eldest daughter of the Jiang family had a flawed destiny and had to be raised deep within the inner chambers, away from outsiders, until her destined match naturally appeared. Yet, they purposely let the most talkative Marquise of Xuanping catch a glimpse of her. Since then, my sister's reputation as the #1 beauty in the capital spread far and wide. Favored by our parents since childhood and doted on by her brothers and sisters, my sister remained as innocent as a young child to this day. Naive and lovely, pure and innocent. I grew up playing with her and keeping her company. When I was punished to kneel in the ancestral hall, she even brought me pastries. Though she was simple-minded and foolish, she had a kind heart. As long as I could see her, Xuan'er would be saved. A sudden clap of thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning illuminated the winding palace paths in the depths of the dark night. The wind whipped up, and a torrential downpour cascaded down. Without waiting for my maid to find an umbrella, I ran toward the Jiaofeng Palace, filled with hope. I hammered and banged on the heavy golden Phoebe wood palace doors. After a long time, footsteps approached from within, accompanied by the sound of heavy rain pelting against an umbrella. They paused for a brief moment, only to gradually recede, leaving only the sound of the rain. My Xuan'er was burning hot all over, his consciousness fading, waiting for the life-saving imperial physicians, just behind this single door. But why? Why would no one open the door? I pounded on the palace doors like a madwoman, crying out for His Majesty, then for my sister. The sound of wind, rain, pounding, and cries for help all mingled together. Yet, there was still no answer. Chuju clutched my sleeve, crying and shouting,
Your ladyship, stop pounding. They won't open it.
My hands were already swollen and bruised, and my voice was hoarse. But that door was my son's only gateway to life. A mouthful of blood welled up in my throat, and I gritted my teeth to swallow it down. Xuan'er was still waiting for me to find an imperial physician to save his life. Xun Tao ran over through the rain, her voice trembling.
Your ladyship, the first prince is having convulsions. Please go back and see him quickly.
The swallowed blood eventually spilled out after all, splattering onto the priceless vermilion gates of Jiaofeng Palace. This Jiaofeng Palace was once Xie Linzhou's promise to grow old together with me, and the reward I deserved for planning his rise step by step for 5 years. But in the end, whether it was affection or glory, it all turned out to be in vain. When Xuan'er was born, the late emperor held him and looked at him for a long time, saying he looked a lot like Xie Linzhou did in his childhood. Probably, the newborn infant reminded him of those sweet, tender times with his beloved noble consort Ro. A few days later, the decree naming him crown prince arrived at our estate. Xie Linzhou said Xuan'er was his lucky star. I raised him like a precious jewel until he was 4 years old. He was as fair and lovely as jade, obedient and sensible too. With him, I had even gradually let go of the betrayal where Xie Linzhou fell deeply in love with my eldest sister after just one meeting and broke his promise to me by crowning her empress. But when I ran back to Chang'e Palace in a frenzy, quickly changed into dry clothes, and finally held Xuan'er in my arms, I realized his body was burning hot and his cheeks were flushed, already completely unconscious. The wet nurses, maids, and eunuchs knelt all over the room, their sorrowful weeping and prayers to Buddha never ceasing. My tears fell like rain as I prayed to every Buddha and deity I could think of, yet none of them showed their power to save him. I have never done a single bad deed. Why must my Xuan'er suffer such a terrible ordeal? No, there is no way out in the palace. Then we must go outside the palace. Holding Xuan'er in my arms, I stood up and ran outside to Xuanwu Gate.
Your ladyship, the palace gates are already locked. We cannot get out.
We must try anyway. The rain seemed to get even heavier. Chuntao and Chuju held umbrellas over Xuan'er and me, while Erbao and Sanbao led the way with lanterns. The group stumbled and rushed toward Xuanwu Gate. Before we could even get close, the guards drew their swords.
Who goes there?
I was burning with anxiety. The first prince is gravely ill and urgently needs a doctor. Open the gate.
If the first prince is ill, the imperial physicians will naturally attend to him. Who on earth are you, daring to speak such nonsense and curse the first prince?
As he spoke, he ordered his men to surround us. I am the noble consort of Chang'e Palace, personally bestowed my title by the emperor. Where is your commander? Have him come see me. The lead guard took a few steps forward. When he saw me under the umbrella, he was clearly startled. He saluted and then quickly turned and ran to find his commander. I prayed to the heavens for protection. I lowered my head to check on Xuan'er's condition. The little child's eyes were tightly shut. He had not regained consciousness since his last seizure. My heart bled with pain. I couldn't help but lower my head to press my cheek against his, seeing him so terribly ill. While I was completely powerless to help him, it was as if my own life was being drained away, as if my own soul was being tormented. If it were possible, I would gladly offer my own life in exchange for his lifelong safety. But the gods in heaven did not hear my prayers. Suddenly, Xuan'er began to convulse again in my arms. I held him tight with both hands, calling his childhood name over and over. Chuju and Chuntao wept as they desperately tried to shield us from the wind and rain with their umbrellas. Erbao and Sanbao knelt on the ground, begging the guards to let us out. I felt utterly desperate and helpless. Guards, please someone help. Who can save my child?
Your ladyship, your highness, the first prince has opened his eyes.
Chuju suddenly cried out in pleasant surprise. I quickly looked down. Xuan'er was no longer convulsing, and he had slightly opened his eyes. Wild with joy, I held him tight. Xuan'er, don't be afraid. Mother is taking you to see a doctor.
Mother.
It was extremely soft, but I heard it. Yes, mother is here. I leaned down to kiss him again, but a long, gasping breath came from his throat, and then there was no more movement. Trembling, I kissed him and called his name. The child who was giggling around me during the day would ignore me no longer at this moment. My legs gave out, unable to support me anymore, and I fell to my knees with a thud. I refused to believe it, frantically telling Chuju and Chuntao to look, but they knelt beside me and wept bitterly. Utterly devastated, I couldn't help but cough up another mouthful of blood. By the time the officer on duty, the second young master of the Duke of Ying's household, arrived, I heard myself murmur, "No need. There is no need anymore." That day, holding the tiny Xuan, I sat at Xuanwu Gate from dusk till dawn, from heavy rain until the sky cleared up. Finally, Xie Linzhou arrived, wearing his imperial robes. I looked at this man I had once loved so deeply. He possessed the bearing of a dragon and phoenix, noble and extremely precious. Right now, his face was filled with grief, and his eyes as he looked at me were full of guilt and heartache. But I only wanted to pounce on him, bite him, and curse him. Why did he have to treat Xuan'er and me this way? Yet I could only keep my eyes wide open, dry of tears, as I pulled his hand to touch Xuan'er, who had burned to death in my arms. Look, what is wrong with Xuan'er? Why is he ignoring me? Xie Linzhou posthumously honored Xuan'er, as the crown prince, burying him with the protocols befitting a crown prince. The imperial court suspended its sessions for 10 days. He was accorded the grandest funerary honors. During those 10 days, he did not return to my eldest sister's Jiaofeng palace. Whenever he had a spare moment, he would come to my quarters. I refused to eat or drink, remained silent, and eventually fainted. He held my hand and watched over me by my bedside the entire time. Seeing me wake up, his face filled with joy, just like when I fell ill before his ascension to the throne. Back then, he had also guarded my side like this until dawn, and his eyes would shine with pure happiness upon seeing me wake. The man standing before me, at this moment, seemed no different from the man he was back then, when Xuan'er was gravely ill. I pounded on the doors in the middle of the night, but could not get a single imperial physician. Is this matter just going to be let go? I spoke my first words in all these days. The joy on Xie Linzhou's face froze.
The maids and older servants who were guarding the gate that night have been sentenced to death by execution. What about exterminating their entire clans?
Guiltily, he avoided my eyes as I stared at him.
That night, Xuan'er felt anxious and had heart palpitations. I stayed with her, and we both took some calming medicine, so we fell asleep early. The sound of the rain was too loud. Nanny Wang is advanced in years and hard of hearing, and Langxiang nodded off, so she didn't hear anything either. Besides, Xuan'er truly cannot do without the two of them. A-Yuan, I grieve deeply for Xuan'er's death as well, but we will have many more children in the future. I promise you.
So this was the explanation he gave me, the explanation he gave to his deceased child. Perhaps he was afraid I would press him further, or perhaps his remaining conscience made him feel guilty and ashamed. He did not dare to look at me again. He said there were still state affairs to attend to in the court, told me to rest well, and hastily departed, leaving me with only the sight of his retreating back. I cried, and then laughed, and then cried again, fainting and waking repeatedly. I became like a wooden puppet, unable to speak or smile, only silently packing and sorting through Xuan'er's belongings day after day. This continued until Xuan'er's body had lain in state for half a month. Xie Linzhou issued an imperial decree to bury Xuan'er in the imperial mausoleum currently under construction for him. That night, I clutched the front of Xie Linzhou's robes and wept aloud. He held me in his arms and whispered words of comfort, his tone so sorrowful it seemed genuine.
Sister, why are you crying?
Holding a clay figurine, my legitimate elder sister poked her head in from the doorway. Seeing Xie Linzhou holding me, she came pattering inside. With a look of displeasure, she pried Xie Linzhou's arms off me and wrapped herself around his arm like a vine, glaring at me defensively.
He is mine. You're not allowed to touch him.
She then dragged Xie Linzhou toward the door.
You haven't played with me for days.
Xie Linzhou looked back at me, his face full of apology.
Ying still has the mind of a child. I'll come back after I take her home.
That night, Xie Linzhou naturally did not return. The next day, I fell ill and was confined to bed, groggy and unable to eat or drink. Xie Linzhou rushed over in a hurry after court, hearing the imperial physician say my excessive grief had damaged my lungs and that I needed a slow recovery. He gave the physician a fierce, inexplicable scolding. Probably because of a guilty conscience. I kept my eyes closed as he pulled me into his chest and whispered apologies to me.
I'm sorry.
What use was an apology? My Xuan'er would never come back. Furthermore, the servants of the Jiaofeng palace had all come from the Jiang family. They were trained by my stepmother for over a decade, specifically to serve my sister as she grew up. I had pounded on that door for so long. How could not a single soul have heard me? It took immense willpower for me to swallow my resentment and anger, forcing myself to lean into his embrace. He let out a soft sigh of relief and fell asleep holding me. Look at that. My child's father has already forgiven himself and is already beginning to forget him. My eyes were completely dry, staring at the pattern of auspicious clouds and cranes on the canopy. When dawn broke, I closed the palace gates to recuperate, asking nothing of palace affairs and ignoring all palace matters. When Xie Linzhou came, I claimed illness and refused to see him. After a few times, he stopped coming. He only sent rewards from time to time. On this day, when I woke from my afternoon nap, the Duchess of Ying came to see me.
Sister Shu and Sister Li both wanted to come and see your grace, but we knew your place is in a sensitive position right now, so I took the liberty of coming alone. Your Highness has lost quite a bit of weight.
My place here has become so quiet and deserted, yet she still remembered me and came. I felt a warmth in my heart. I am much better now. Thank you all for keeping me in your thoughts.
Your ladyship must still take care of yourself. While there is life, there is hope. Those of us from the various households all know how difficult things have been for you.
The Duchess of Ying leaned forward.
Our families are all feeling quite anxious in our hearts.
The families of the Duke of Ying, the Duke of Zhao, the general of agile cavalry, and the general who guards the north are all old loyalists who have followed Xie Linzhou since his days at the pre-imperial residence. Now that even I, his first wife, have fallen to such a state, it is no wonder they are feeling anxious and uneasy. I could offer no words of comfort and could only manage a bitter smile. Seeing that I was weary and lacking energy, the Duchess of Yang took her leave and returned home. Though I drank bitter medicine 3 times a day, I remained deeply depressed and unhappy. Chuju has always been very quick-eared and sharp-eyed. She often tells me stories from outside the palace as jokes, hoping to cheer me up a bit.
For example, Nanny Wang and the others by my elder sister's side, who are helping her manage the palace affairs, have still not settled the accounts for May, even though it is already July. And in order to show favor on behalf of my sister, the single bowl of mung bean soup given to every servant during the scorching heat, to a choice of 3, white fungus lotus seed soup, rock sugar mung bean soup, or lily bulb water chestnut soup. Not only did the expenses skyrocket, but it also sparked numerous arguments and disputes, adding a great deal of resentment.
And for another example, the court ministers, though split into several factions, suddenly spoke with one voice, petitioning the emperor to hold a draft to expand the imperial harem and carry on the royal lineage. Xie Linzhou was overwhelmed with trouble. After dealing with the ministers, he still had to help my elder sister clean up her messes in the harem. He barged into my bedroom, but seeing me pale and unable to even get out of bed, he swallowed back everything he wanted to say. I ignored everything, keeping my palace gates closed to lead a quiet life. I slept early, woke up early, and ate well, and my body slowly began to recover. By the time a chill settled into the mornings and evenings, I took advantage of the brief afternoon warmth to doze off under the silk tree in the courtyard. Chuju had gone out to collect our monthly allowance. Chuntao was ironing clothes inside, and only a young maid, Xuan'er, was under the veranda peeling lotus seeds, half asleep and half awake. I heard the palace gates creak open, thinking Chuju had returned. I waited, but there was no sound for a long time. I opened my eyes and looked. My elder sister, holding a kite, was standing at the entrance, staring at me blankly.
Sister, where is Xuan'er? I came to play with him.
A sharp pain shot through my heart. My lips twitched into a bitter smile.
He is gone. Did you not know? How could he be gone?
My sister ran over and squatted beside me, tilting her head innocently as she asked me, "He is just gone. You will never see him again."
But Nanny said, Xuan'er is only sick and will get well very soon.
Thinking Nanny Wang had merely coaxed her with a lie, I asked casually, "When did Nanny tell you that?"
On the day of the heavy rain and thunder.
It felt like a bolt of lightning had struck me. Trembling, I sat up, trying my best to sound gentle and coaxing as I asked, "On that night, did you hear me pounding on the door begging for help? Like a child caught in a lie?" My sister stood up, looking rather embarrassed.
I heard it. But Nanny said Xuan'er only has the same sleeping sickness as me. If I opened the door, Linzhou would go to Xuan'er and wouldn't keep me company anymore.
Speaking of Xie Linzhou, she suddenly seemed to regain her confidence.
Linzhou is my husband. I won't let him see anyone else, not even Xuan'er.
I dug my fingernails into my palms, but even drawing blood couldn't stop the trembling. Holding back my tears, I forced a smile. "Sister, because you didn't open the door that night, Xuan'er died. He is buried in the ground and can never come back to life. He will never eat chestnut cakes with you again. And he will never fly kites with you again." My legitimate elder sister still had an innocent look on her face, an innocence so heartless and cruel.
Then I'll just find someone else to play with.
I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Sister, Xuan'er is dead. Xie Linzhou was originally my husband. Do you truly not understand? Or do you just refuse to understand?" I didn't miss the momentary flash of panic on my sister's face, followed by the embarrassment and anger of being caught in a lie.
He is not your husband. He is my husband. I'm going to tell Linzhou.
She yelled angrily, then huffed and ran off holding her kite. I collapsed onto the chaise lounge, seemingly seeing Xuan'er smilingly holding up a piece of fruit for me to eat, only for everything to vanish in the next instant. Since marrying Xie Linzhou, I have never had a single day of leisure. Before the age of 5, he was the most favored prince in the entire imperial city. But as his maternal family was implicated in the treason case of the king of the Eastern Sea, the entire family was exiled, never to return to court. His birth mother, Consort Ro, was abandoned by the late emperor and hanged herself in her palace. In an instant, he fell from the clouds into the mud, becoming a useless prince whom anyone could bully. He had no favor, nor did he have the support of an influential maternal family. To survive, Xie Linzhou pretended to be crippled with a broken leg for many years. When it came time for him to marry, the other prince's consorts were all daughters of high-ranking officials. Only he was casually betrothed by the late emperor to me, the concubine's daughter of a declining clan. Since childhood, I had been my legitimate older sister's playmate. If she was well, the whole family was happy. If she was not, I was the scapegoat. From childhood to adulthood, I never had a single day of peace and comfort. I even slept with my heart in my throat, constantly terrified that my sister might be displeased with something. When I learned I was to marry the most useless seventh prince, I could not help but feel joy. I knew he had a difficult life, but it did not matter. I knew the pain of being beaten, scolded, and bullied. I knew the despair of shattered dignity. I knew the misery of having no one to protect me. I would do my best to draw closer to him, to love and understand each other, but I never expected that Xie Linzhou also understood me. On our wedding night, I sat upright and in perfect order. He personally lifted my veil and took off my phoenix crown, then handed me a bowl of peanut sweet soup.
Don't worry. I am here for everything. We will live a good life together.
Dressed in his bright red wedding robes, Xie Linzhou was handsome, elegant, and gentle as jade. With just one look, my heart was filled with joy. In addition to personally taking care of his daily life, I also devised plans to rescue him from his predicaments, and even risked my life to save him multiple times. When he led troops to fight the enemy in Yun City, and the provisions were delayed for a long time, I went as far as to sell my dowry to gather supplies and personally escorted them to him. At that time, he had eyes only for me. Amidst the swirling snow of the borderland, inside the dilapidated tent, he held my frostbitten feet in his hands and swore with tears in his eyes.
A-Yuan, I will never fail you in this lifetime.
Because of this oath, I even, when he led his troops to retake the capital, willingly used myself as bait so he could wipe out the remaining factions of the 4th and 6th princes in one fell swoop. From then on, he rose like a dragon taking to the water, with a smooth path ahead. Yet even a vow made at a freezing frontier where water turns to ice easily dissipates when encountering the most beautiful flower in the capital. In March of the following year, I returned to the Jiang family home to pay my respects to my father. Xie Linzhou returned to the capital and secretly came to the Jiang house to pick me up, only to see my innocent and pure legitimate elder sister playing on a swing in the garden. He fell in love with her at first sight and wiped out all affection he had for me in a single stroke. By that time, Xie Linzhou had already established his power. My father and stepmother both said he was the fated one my sister had been waiting for. I refused to believe it, but on the day of his coronation, Xie Linzhou instated my sister as the Empress, while only making me the noble consort, and in front of the whole world, he declared that my sister, Jiang Shuying, was the love of his life, and that he would never hold another imperial selection or take any more concubine. Like a young boy experiencing love for the first time, he said to me self-consciously,
That day, as I watched Xuan'er standing on the swing, asking her maids to push her higher and higher, so vibrant, bright, and untouched by the world, I realized she is everything people like us yearn for. The world and human hearts change easily, but only Xuan'er remains forever pure. I want to protect her for the rest of my life.
My heart was filled with bitterness. Linzhou, what about me? You want a lifetime with her, so where do I belong? Xie Linzhou's expression shifted several times, and he spoke with an apology on his lips.
A-Yuan, Xuan'er is innocent and simple. Only the position of Empress can protect her from being looked down upon by others. You have always been sensible, so please settle for being the noble consort, alright?
Seeing me remain silent, he added anxiously,
Don't worry. Xuan'er's position as crown prince is absolutely secure.
Only a few days after my sister moved into Jiaofeng Palace, Xie Linzhou came to see me again, asking me to manage the affairs of the 6 palaces.
Xuan'er is simple-minded and cannot scheme against others, but you are well practiced in it.
Now that he had become the emperor above tens of thousands, he began to disdain me for being scheming.
The court ministers do not yet know of the Empress's situation. To the outside world, you will only say that the Empress is kind-hearted and simply cannot be bothered with managing affairs.
While trampling on my reputation, he did not forget to protect the reputation of my legitimate elder sister. He left immediately after saying this, not seeing my deathly pale face. And just like that, in my position as noble consort, I managed the affairs of the imperial harem for 3 years, but without the proper title or the emperor's favor. Others only said the noble consort was domineering and power-hungry, while my legitimate sister was the empress and held His Majesty's exclusive favor, yet was so oppressed by the noble consort that she could not manage the harem. Several wives of the dukes and generals who were on good terms with me came to the palace specifically to see me. I could only smile bitterly. During the morning court, Xie Linzhou flew into a rage.
The noble consort and I have just lost our child, yet you demand a draft selection. Are you trying to pierce my heart and the noble consort's?
The entire civil and military court claimed they dared not. My legitimate sister clung to Xie Linzhou more and more tightly. Aside from attending court court sessions and reviewing memorials, he had to spend all his free time accompanying her. But with matters piling up in both the court and the harem, Xie Linzhou could not help but be busy as a spinning top. My body has mostly recovered, but I still keep my palace doors closed. My stepmother came into the palace to visit my elder sister, and on her way out, she made a detour to Changle Palace.
Your Highness, the noble consort seems to have recovered well. Since you are healthy now, why don't you resume managing the affairs of the harem?
Though she called me noble consort, there was no respect in her tone.
The Emperor has always highly valued the Empress. Surely the Empress will soon become pregnant and give birth to a crown prince. As long as the Empress and the crown prince are well, it will also be your Highness, the noble consort's blessing.
Since childhood, my legal mother had treated me like a plaything. In her eyes, I was merely a tool for my legitimate sister. To be able to help my sister even a little bit was my blessing. I smiled slightly, as submissive as ever. Mother, please show me some mercy and let me rest for a few more days. I will be nearly recovered after the Mid-Autumn Festival. Having received a satisfactory answer, my stepmother did not even bow. Before turning around and leaving, Chuju and Chuntao were half dead with anger. I fanned myself with my round fan, closing my eyes in silence. No rush. Every single person who harmed my Xuan'er, none of them will escape. The governor of Yunggui had beaten the 18 tribes of Nanman into submission. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, he was to bring the leaders of the 18 tribes to the capital for an audience, along with auspicious gifts to present. The court and the public were shaken. Xie Linzhou was overjoyed. He ordered that the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet must grandly showcase the magnificent majesty of the Celestial Empire. To this end, he even brought his wet nurse, who had been retiring outside the palace, back inside to oversee the Jiaofeng Palace and help my elder sister manage the banquet affairs. On the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, every corner of the Imperial Palace was filled with joy, yet my Changle Palace remained completely quiet. Chuju stood at the doorway, quietly muttering curses for half the day. I called her in to eat some pastries. Don't be so angry. Our good days are yet to come. We must watch him build his high tower and watch him banquet his guests. Only when we watch his tower collapse can we truly vent the resentment in our chests. The palace banquet began. I sat below my elder sister, as quiet as a flower vase. Xie Linzhou and my elder sister sat side by side at the high seats. The emperor was handsome and majestic, and though the empress carried a touch of playful innocence, she was bright and dignified. Anyone who saw them would praise the love between the emperor and empress. Over 100 night-glowing pearls and thousands of bright candles illuminated the hall as bright as day. The governor of Yunggui stood in the center of the hall and ordered a 3-foot-tall cage, tightly covered with a cloth, to be wheeled up. My elder sister could not help but stand up to look down. Xie Linzhou pulled her arm with a doting smile. The governor of Yunggui ordered the black cloth to be lifted. A large, pure white elephant appeared before everyone. It was clear the white elephant had been thoroughly washed, and it now lay docilely inside the cage, its fan-like ears flapping. Elephants were already a rare sight, let alone a pure white one. The ministers gasped in admiration, though some were puzzled. Wasn't it supposed to be a white tiger? But those doubts were instantly drowned out by a chorus of praises. My eldest sister, cheerful as a bird, flew down from the imperial throne and circled around the cage.
Linzhou, I want to keep it in Jiaofeng Palace.
Xie Linzhou smiled and coaxed her.
That won't do. It is too big. You can go to the royal zoo to see it anytime.
Pouting her lips, my sister continued to look at the white elephant, even leaning against the cage to reach out and touch it. In an instant, disaster struck. As if provoked by something, the white elephant suddenly stood up, swinging its trunk. It raised its front legs and let out a long roar, thrashing wildly inside the cage toward my sister. My sister froze on the spot, completely dumbfounded. How terrifying a sudden rampage of a white elephant could be. She, being the closest, felt it most vividly. Xie Linzhou rushed forward in a few strides and pulled my sister behind him.
What is going on? Where is the beast tamer?
The governor of Yunggui knelt to beg for forgiveness. The beast tamer was busy trying to pacify the white elephant. Everyone was trembling with fear. The hall was so quiet that a falling pin could be heard, save for the low growls of the white elephant. And another thing, a dripping sound coming from somewhere.
Linzhou,
My sister's face was flushed red, and she was on the verge of tears. Xie Linzhou followed the sound and looked down. Right where my sister stood, there was a bright puddle of liquid that was still spreading outward. I thought my sister would only cry and lose her composure from being frightened by the mad elephant, but I never expected her, on the spot, to wet herself. A grand event of foreign tributaries paying respects, and the appearance of an auspicious omen. Because the Empress lost her composure, it turned into a complete joke. Even after lying down in the bed of my palace, I couldn't help but sneer when I recalled Xie Linzhou's expression at the time. It was as if Xie Linzhou had only just realized that his innocent, pure, and radiant first wife, was also human and had bodily functions. His face showed terror, suspicion, and utter disbelief. Only after a few moments did he furiously order everyone to shut up and forbid any discussion of the matter, threatening to charge violators with showing contempt for imperial majesty. He then picked her up and stormed off. But the emperor's highly favored empress is a fool, was disliked by the auspicious beast, and even lost control of her bladder in front of the entire court and foreign envoys. An incident, this massive, would, even before dawn, spread throughout the entire capital tonight. Xie Linzhou failed to consider that when the imperial family's dignity is at stake, how could the court officials and the imperial clan let the matter drop? He has lost all face, and my elder sister will soon learn what it feels like to be secretly despised and utterly humiliated. I had a rare night of good sleep. Sure enough, the very next day, censor officials and members of the imperial clan jointly petitioned, asking Xie Linzhou to depose the empress. The Duke of Zhu and the general of the flying cavalry, as trusted ministers from Xie Linzhou's days before ascending the throne, could only stand on Xie Linzhou's side. Yet they only said that this was His Majesty's family matter, to be decided by His Majesty himself. They did not, as Xie Linzhou had hinted, resolutely support and defend my elder sister. Xie Linzhou flew into a rage, but the censor officials and the imperial clan were not intimidated at all. They stated bluntly that the empress, as the mother of the nation, should be a role model for all women under heaven. However, Jiang Shuying is mentally deficient. Domestically, she is incompetent and cannot manage palace affairs, and externally, her loss of composure has damaged the dignity of the dynasty. Furthermore, her mental deficiency might negatively affect her offspring, making her truly unfit for the position of empress. Xie Linzhou flicked his sleeves and dismissed the court in anger, ordering a strict investigation into why the white elephant had suddenly gone wild. They investigated for over 10 days, until the beast tamer suddenly remembered that the white elephant was extremely obsessed with a local Siam plant called seven-leaf fragrance. Moreover, this plant has a very strong scent, which the Siam royal family often uses to make perfume, and what my elder sister wore that day happened to be the very perfume tribute sent from Siam a few days ago. The matter could only be left unresolved. I carefully drew some floral patterns and had my jewelry shop craft them accordingly. I presumed the wife of the governor of Yunnan and Guizhou would like them. While the capital seemed calm on the surface, undercurrents were surging. My stepmother came to Changle Palace once again. With a beaming smile, she delivered the joyful news to me.
What wonderful news for you, noble consort. Her Majesty the Empress is pregnant.
Seeing me freeze for a moment, my stepmother's smile deepened even further.
Once Her Majesty gives birth to the crown prince and remembers your hard work, noble consort, your good days will truly begin.
Mother is right. My sister's pregnancy is indeed a grand occasion. My stepmother added that Xie Linzhou was so overjoyed he didn't know what to do with himself. He even bestowed the late emperor's personal jade pendant and consort ruse jade pillow upon my elder sister, wishing only for her to have a safe and smooth pregnancy. I echoed her words with a smile. Once my stepmother had flaunted enough, she left in high spirits. Chuju and Chunchao looked at me with concern. I pulled out a deck of leaf cards. Come, let's play some cards while we have some free time. I truly did not care. After all, whether this child would be a boy or a girl remained to be seen. Besides, whether it could be safely born and raised successfully after birth depended entirely on the will of heaven. Within half a day, the entire capital knew of the empress's pregnancy. During the court imperial audience the next day, no one mentioned deposing the empress anymore. Between Xie Linzhou, the ministers, and the imperial clan, a bizarre equilibrium was established. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the child in the empress's womb to be born. After his initial ecstasy, Xie Linzhou came to Changle Palace one evening. After beating around the bush for a long while, he finally stated his purpose clearly.
A-Yuan, Ying'er is pregnant and shouldn't overexert herself regarding the matters of the imperial harem.
I considerately took over the conversation. If your majesty and sister deem me worthy, I will naturally take on the responsibility without hesitation. After all, my sister's pregnancy is of the utmost importance. Xie Linzhou let out a visible sigh of relief. His eyes were filled with deep affection.
A-Yuan, you are still the one who understands me best.
He took my hand and gently caressed it. I played along, lowering my head with a shy smile.
Linzhou.
My legitimate elder sister suddenly burst in. Seeing Xie Linzhou holding my hand, she instantly flared up in anger.
You clearly promised me that you wouldn't come to my sister's place.
Xie Linzhou immediately let go of my hand and gently chided her.
How did you get here by yourself? Where are your attendants? You are about to become a mother, yet you are still so reckless.
My sister threw a triumphant glance at me, as if to say, "See, Linzhou is my husband." I let out a soft chuckle. Your Majesty, please accompany my sister back. She needs you right now. Xie Linzhou's eyes held a mix of satisfaction and guilt, but I no longer cared in the slightest. The next day, noble consort of Changle Palace reassumed control over the affairs of the imperial harem. My very first task was to seek out Xie Linzhou and entrust all matters regarding my sister's pregnancy and childbirth to Xie Linzhou's former wet nurse. I am still young, and I have just lost a child. For the sake of my sister and the imperial offspring, it would be much safer to leave this to Nanny Dong. Xie Linzhou agreed without a second thought.
A-Yuan is indeed thoughtful.
From then on, whenever purchased vegetables, fruits, or rare foods and delicacies sent as tributes arrived, a large portion would be set aside immediately upon entering the palace and delivered directly to the private kitchen of Jiaofeng Palace. All kinds of tonics and essentials for preventing miscarriage were also sent straight to Jiaofeng Palace after being inspected by the head of the Imperial Academy of Medicine. So what if the Empress was born simple-minded? She possessed the Emperor's exclusive favor and was carrying the imperial heir. Naturally, there were plenty of people eager to curry favor with her. For a time, the Palace of Pepper Grace was bustling with excitement. An endless stream of people came to pay their respects to the Empress. Xie Linzhou originally wanted to put a stop to it, but my eldest sister loved the excitement and said she liked having so many people come to play with her. Xie Linzhou let her have her way, though he privately warned those serving her that they must serve her with the utmost care and ensure everything went according to her wishes. But my eldest sister had been deeply doted on since childhood, and after marrying Xie Linzhou, she also enjoyed his exclusive favor. Her life had always been smooth sailing, and she did everything purely based on her own whims. As her pregnancy progressed, her temper became increasingly erratic, and her actions grew more and more reckless. After finishing his administrative duties, Xie Linzhou went to the Palace of Pepper Grace, where he happened to run into the newly arrived Marchioness of Ale and the heir's consort of the Marquis of Dongxiang. It was said that the Dongxiang heir's consort was lively and playful, and she was singing a little tune to amuse my eldest sister. Before Xie Linzhou even entered the room, he heard her beautiful singing voice. When the people inside heard that the emperor had arrived, they quickly excused themselves, perhaps out of curiosity. Xie Linzhou cast an extra glance at the Dongxiang heir's consort. My eldest sister threw a tantrum on the spot. First, she clamored that the Dongxiang heir's consort was seducing the emperor, and then she cried, "Linzhou, have you taken a liking to her too?" The Dongxiang heir's consort wept all the way home, crying out that she had been wrong. The very next day, she left for the south with the Dongxiang heir, not returning to the capital for a long time. Xie Linzhou was both angry and frustrated, yet he couldn't bring himself to speak harshly to his pregnant empress. He could only tolerate and yield. But my eldest sister suddenly seemed to possess the mind of a young girl, missing none of the paranoia, suspicion, and petty jealousy. When Xie Linzhou was delayed by discussions with his ministers and missed his dinner with her, she made a scene and barged in, insisting on seeing which little seductress Xie Linzhou was hiding. When the senior maid of Xie Linzhou's imperial study reached 25, and was about to leave the palace, Xie Linzhou bestowed a reward upon her from the imperial treasury. My sister said sarcastically, "If your majesty is so reluctant to part with her, why don't you just keep her?" I knew very well that with my eldest sister's intellect, she could never have come up with these thoughts on her own, nor could she have formulated such words. Naturally, someone by her side must have been instigating her. Soon, winter arrived. By chance, I ran into Xie Linzhou in a pavilion by the lake in the imperial garden. He looked somewhat lost.
A-Yuan, did I do something wrong?
Before I could say a word, my legitimate elder sister rushed over and shoved me. She was already 5 months pregnant, and now, cradling her belly, she told me to stay away from Xie Linzhou. Xie Linzhou got up to soothe her. I tactfully excused myself, only to catch the smug and triumphant look in Nanny Wang's eyes. Day in and day out, she filled my eldest sister's head with the idea of keeping a close eye on Xie Linzhou, so he wouldn't be lured away by some little vixen. I knew not whether this was my stepmother's instruction, or Nanny Wang acting on her own initiative, but with such scenes happening every few days, even though Xie Linzhou loved my sister deeply, he grew highly irritated. Gradually, he began to visit the Jiaofeng Palace less and less frequently. My elder sister naturally noticed this. She would throw tantrums whenever she couldn't find Xie Linzhou, insisting he drop everything to coax and accompany her before she would stop. My stepmother also visited the palace more and more frequently, never failing to warn and lecture me each time. But all matters regarding my sister's pregnancy and childbirth were managed entirely by Nanny Dong. As for any items brought into the palace, the best of everything was always sent to my sister first, and I never laid a single finger on any of it. But with so many delicious foods and precious supplements, I do not know if Nanny Wang knew to have my elder sister exercise some moderation. My elder sister kept throwing tantrums right up until her labor, and no one dared to advise or or restrain her. I kept avoiding them, never showing my face in front of her or Xie Linzhou. On the day she went into labor, I sat in the front hall of Jiaofeng Palace, sitting from the break of dawn until the evening glow filled the sky. My elder sister was still crying out in pain. The midwife rushed out with hands covered in blood, knelt, and reported,
Her Majesty the Empress is still not fully dilated, and the baby is too large, causing a difficult labor. We beg your Majesty for instructions.
Xie Linzhou was covered in sweat, whether from anxiety or heat, and roared,
Save them both. If you cannot save them, you will all be buried with them.
The midwife scrambled back into the delivery room. After an agonizing night, my elder sister's painful cries grew weaker and weaker, but my stepmother and the midwives kept telling her to push. Just as dawn was breaking, after one last heart-wrenching shriek of pain, we finally heard a cry, weak as a kitten's whimpering.
Congratulations, Your Majesty. Her Majesty the Empress has given birth to a little prince.
My stepmother came out cradling the infant to deliver the good news. Xie Linzhou eagerly leaned in to look at the child, but then he froze.
What is wrong with his face?
Glancing from the side, I saw the chubby baby's face was purplish blue.
It is only because the labor took a bit too long. He will be fine once he is nursed. Look at these chubby arms and legs. He is very robust.
My stepmother's joy was so overwhelming it could have flooded the entire room. Only then did Xie Linzhou cheer up. He turned to return to Taiji Palace to decree a general amnesty to pray for the prince. I offered a barrage of congratulations, and not wanting to be an eyesore, I returned to Chang'e Palace first. It seemed my sister and her child were highly favored by heaven. As soon as we returned to our palace, Xuntao began wiping away tears.
They certainly are happy. But who still remembers our little prince?
I stared blankly in silence. Chuju nudged her and pulled her out. That night, I didn't fall asleep until nearly midnight. But just after 3 a.m., Chuju gently woke me up.
Your ladyship.
The little prince of Jiaofeng Palace has passed away. Things are in chaos over there. I sat up. Wasn't he fine when he was just born?
I heard he didn't cry or fuss, and wouldn't take any milk. The Empress's mother initially stopped them from summoning the imperial physician. In the latter half of the night, his breathing grew faint. Then they hurriedly sent someone to the Imperial Academy of Medicine. But by the time the physician arrived, it was already too late.
I fell into a long silence, not knowing whether to feel relieved or sorrowful. I never expected that in the end, heaven would take away this newborn baby. Chuju looked at me a few times and then said softly,
They say Her Majesty's womb was damaged, and she lost too much blood. She will probably find it very difficult to conceive again.
I turned my eyes to look out of the pitch-black window. I wondered if my elder sister's current grief over losing her child was the same as mine was back then, an agony that pierced to the very bone. Before Xie Linzhou's overwhelming joy could even last the night, it was completely dampened by the infant prince's premature death. At dawn, I rushed to the Jiaofeng Palace. The ground was filled with kneeling people. My stepmother was crying and screaming, begging Xie Linzhou to conduct a thorough investigation. Seeing me arrive, she immediately pointed at me, gnashing her teeth.
You little wretch. Was it you who did this?
I was stunned, looking at the silent Xie Linzhou. His gaze was heavy with grief.
Mother-in-law, mind your words. A-Yuan has always been kind-hearted. How could she do such a thing? The imperial physician said the prince's premature death was due to a difficult labor because of his large size, and he was stuck in the womb for too long. That is why. Besides, since the prince's condition wasn't right, why didn't you summon the imperial physician sooner? Mother-in-law.
My stepmother's body stiffened. She fell straight to her knees and began to wail once more. I sat with Xie Linzhou for a while, watching him fly into a rage and severely punish everyone involved and uninvolved alike. After offering him some gentle words of comfort, I finally returned to Chang'e Palace. My stepmother stayed in the palace until my elder sister finished her confinement period before leaving. Every time I went to visit, my stepmother would make sarcastic accusations against me and refuse to let me see my sister. I heard that my sister searched for her child every day. When she couldn't find him, she would lose her temper. She wanted to see Xie Linzhou, but my stepmother wouldn't let her leave her room during her confinement. But recently, war broke out again in the northwest. Xie Linzhou was so busy that he could only stay at Jiaofeng Palace for a brief moment before leaving. How could my sister be satisfied with that? She kept pressing Xie Linzhou, asking if he had found some other seductress. Smashing a whole room of things at the slightest dissatisfaction became her way of venting her pain, and Xie Linzhou tolerated her every single time. I made some hazelnut pastries myself and went to the Hall of State Affairs. Xie Linzhou had just finished discussing matters with his ministers and was staring blankly, sitting on the throne. I went forward, set down the hazelnut pastries, and walked behind him to massage his temples.
A-Yuan, losing 2 sons in a row. Is this my retribution?
Your Majesty is the true dragon, the son of heaven. The princes must have been so beloved by the gods in heaven, that they were summoned early to serve at their side. Xie Linzhou turned back to look at me, tears glistening in his eyes. I lowered my head, my voice catching with a sob. After Xuan'er passed away, that was exactly how I thought of it, to hold on until now. Xie Linzhou turned around and hugged me, leaning his head against my waist and abdomen. As he let out a weeping sob, I hugged him back, tears streaming down my face as well.
A-Yuan, perhaps heaven is punishing me. It is I who am wrong.
It was as soft as a murmur. I pretended not to hear it. How could the son of heaven ever be wrong? When the winter jasmine bloomed, I saw my eldest sister who had lost her child for the first time. Previously, she was merely intellectually disabled, speaking and acting like a young girl. But now, she was somewhat pathologically temperamental and hysterical. As soon as she saw me, she ran up and grabbed me, her eyes wide and staring.
Where is Linzhou? Did he go to find you? Why hasn't he come to see me? You are not allowed to steal my Linzhou.
Nanny Wang and the maidservants rushed up and coaxed her with gentle words before she slowly let go of me.
Peace be with you, noble consort. The Empress is merely suffering from a temporary shock. Some things your highness should just look at. Do not think of them as your own.
Before leaving, Nanny Wang offered words that seemed respectful but carried a warning. I merely smiled. Xie Linzhou had only visited Changel Palace a few more times than usual, yet they were already growing restless. What belongs to someone belongs to them. It cannot be stolen away. This truth, I trust Nanny Wang understands as well. For the past few months, my eldest sister's behavior became increasingly unseemly. When she thought of her child, she would look everywhere for them. When she thought of Xie Linzhou, she would search everywhere for him. At first, Xie Linzhou would always hold her gently, coaxing her and whispering countless solemn vows and sweet words. But my sister's condition showed no signs of improvement. The Imperial Academy of Medicine was scolded by Xie Linzhou several times. But though the imperial physicians prescribed various formulas, my sister adamantly refused to drink the medicine, leaving the physicians completely at their wits' end. The Empress had lost her child and her sanity, which reignited the eagerness of the court officials who had temporarily quieted down. Memorials requesting the emperor to hold a draft for new imperial concubines piled high on the imperial desk. Yet, my sister rushed into the imperial court during the morning audience, weeping and scratching at the officials who had spoken out the loudest, creating a massive scene. Xie Linzhou loved her deeply. He had braved immense pressure to favor her alone and leave the harem empty. After they lost the child, he let her weep, rage, and strike him to vent her grief. But with this outburst, my sister caused Xie Linzhou to utterly lose face before the court officials and the imperial clan. He was willing to be her husband, but in this imperial court, he was the emperor.
Jiang Shuying, what do you think you are doing? Get back to Jiaofeng Palace.
For the first time, he lost his temper at her, though it was merely a mild reprimand, without even placing her under house arrest. But neither my sister nor the people backing her understood. My sister did not understand why Xie Linzhou would yell at her when she had thrown many such tantrums before without issue. The people backing her did not understand that Xie Linzhou's reprimand was actually a form of protection. Instead, fearing she would fall from favor, they urged her to hold on to Xie Linzhou even tighter. That night, Xie Linzhou went to the Jiaofeng Palace. The lights remained lit for half the night, but Xie Linzhou eventually returned to the Taiji Palace in a fit of rage. The ministers naturally would not let this opportunity slip by. More and more memorials were submitted, calling for a draft and the deposition of the Empress, but Xie Linzhou suppressed them all and took no action. He also stopped visiting Jiaofeng Palace, though he still kept a close eye on everything concerning my elder sister. As for me, I remained that gentle, understanding confidante. Only now, this confidante was exuding a different kind of charm. If you want your wishes to come true, when he was at the Xuanzheng Hall, I would send soup and pastries from time to time. When he came to the Changel Palace, I would accompany him to play games, compose poetry, drink tea, and play chess. And, at night, I would naturally keep him company as a loving companion. As for the mad ravings from the Jiaofeng Palace, I merely treated them as the barking of a dog. When the peonies bloomed, I became pregnant. I was already 3 months along. After the initial joy and surprise, Xie Linzhou gently chided me for not telling him sooner. This baby is so well behaved, not at all like how Xuan'er was back then. I was afraid it was all just a dream. Xie Linzhou fell into a long silence. Holding me close, he said,
It won't be. He will grow up healthy.
The Duchess of Ying and the Duchess of Zhao came together to Changel Palace to pay their respects.
Your Highness's bitter days have finally turned to sweetness. Tomorrow, we shall go to the Huguo Temple to pray for your Highness and the young prince.
With a smile, I offered them the newly made pastries from my palace kitchen. Thank you both for keeping me in your thoughts. This pregnancy has been very stable. I haven't suffered much at all. The Duke of Ying, the Duke of Zhao, as well as the General of Agile Cavalry and the General of the North, were people I had known since I married Xie Linzhou. During those difficult years that followed, I planned and schemed every step of the way for Xie Linzhou, which made me even closer to their wives. There was no movement from the Zhaofeng Palace, but my stepmother came to the Chang'e Palace the following day. She stared intently at my belly, which was not yet showing. I used my wide sleeve to cover it unobtrusively. Only then did she look up at me, forcing a smile.
Noble consort, this pregnancy of yours really comes at the perfect time. If it is a boy, you must plan well for his future. Her Majesty the Empress enjoys the Emperor's favor. Her child will certainly be the crown prince. Noble consort, why don't you?
I smiled and shook my head. Mother, you have overstepped. My legal mother was stunned for a moment. Once she realized what happened, she flew into a rage.
Do you think that just because you are called noble consort, you have truly risen above your station? At the end of the day, you are nothing but a concubine. What kind of grand future can the child of a concubine possibly have?
I looked at my legal mother as she flung her sleeves and walked away, smiling without a word. In the evening, I had Chuju quietly summon the imperial physician. When the lamps were lit, Xie Linzhou rushed in anxiously.
Are you feeling unwell? Why did you call the physician?
I am fine. The physician said I am just worrying and thinking too much. I smiled and welcomed him. He helped me sit down.
Did your mother say something to you?
I lowered my head. Mother wants me to give this child to sister, to ease sister's grief. Xie Linzhou pulled me into his arms.
Do not worry. Xuan'er is still a child herself. How could she raise a child well? If she hadn't been so childish and reckless before, things wouldn't have.
His hand around me tightened instantly. I pulled at his lapel. You should go visit sister more often. Sister's heart and eyes are entirely filled with you. If the two of them do not meet, how can they discover that the love which was meant to last a lifetime, the exclusive favor in the deep palace, can actually end in mutual resentment? I no longer need Xie Linzhou's love now. I only need his guilt. His guilt for demoting me from wife to concubine. His guilt for my innocent child who died of illness. Even though I was pregnant, but I still took charge of organizing the imperial birthday banquet. That day, the breeze was gentle, and the weather was beautiful. Noble ladies from both inside and outside the court gathered in Zhaofeng Palace. My elder sister, comforted by Xie Linzhou's affection, still appeared charming and innocent, yet dignified. Everything was going smoothly at first, until we were watching the fireworks after the banquet. The little heir, who was sleeping in the arms of the princess consort of Yang, whimpered a few times in his sleep. No one around paid much attention, but my sister turned and stared fixedly at the child in the princess consort's arms. She even broke free from Xie Linzhou's hand, walked up to the princess consort of Yang, and reached out to hold the little heir. The princess consort of Yang trembled slightly in fear, but she did not dare to refuse. My sister held the 2-year-old heir in her arms, watching his face wrinkle as his sleep was disturbed, and then smooth out again as he drifted back to sleep in her embrace. Suddenly, she turned back to Xie Linzhou, her face full of surprise and anticipation.
Linzhou, look.
Xie Linzhou looked down and gently touched the baby's cheek.
He is a good child. Quickly return him to the princess consort of Yang.
Not mine.
The grand fireworks display had just come to an end, making my sister's voice stand out exceptionally clear. The festive atmosphere instantly turned cold and silent. The princess consort of Yang fell to her knees with a thud, wanting to cry but not daring to, wanting to speak but not daring to open her mouth. After recovering from his shock, Xie Linzhou tried to coax my sister.
Xuan'er, this is not our child. Give him back first. We will have our own children in the future.
My sister held on tightly and refused to let go.
But I was pregnant. I want him.
On the emperor's birthday, the imperial clan, high-ranking officials, and noble ladies were all gathered. At this moment, everyone was staring at the emperor and empress. My mother hesitated in the crowd, wanting to step forward. Xie Linzhou's eyes were as dark and deep as an ancient well. The already silent atmosphere seemed to be slowly freezing over. Yet my sister was completely oblivious.
No. My child went to become an immortal. Xuan'er is dead too. I want him.
A pang of grief hit my heart, and I stared at Xie Linzhou.
Empress.
Xie Linzhou barked angrily.
Have you no sense of propriety or decorum?
I was far from the only one scoffing inwardly. The reigning emperor and empress, when have they ever cared for propriety or decorum? The young heir was awoken by the noise. Finding himself held by a stranger, he burst into tears. The Prince of Ying's family was frantic with worry, yet they dared not step forward. My legitimate mother came over to support my sister and made a sycophantic jest to ease the tension.
This child shares a special destiny with Her Majesty. Why not have him raised under Her Majesty's care? It would be a blessing for the child.
The faces of everyone present instantly fell. Who was the Prince of Yang, the son of the dynastic founder, who had served through 3 reigns? In his youth, he he single-handedly rescued the grand ancestor from enemy encirclement. In his middle age, he led 1,000 riders to raid the Hu court, beheading the Tuju chieftain and securing 30 years of peace for the northern frontier. Moreover, many in the Prince of Ying's family had joined the military, with 7 or 8 out of 10 dying in battle. None were useless royals living off the state's coffers. They were universally recognized by the court as paragons of loyalty and valor. This young heir was the sole male descendant of this generation. Yet, my legitimate mother actually suggested raising him under a mentally incompetent empress. This was not just a slap in the face to the Prince of Ying's estate and the imperial clan. It was a slap in the face to the entire court. I risk my life to serve the nation, only for you to let my child become a plaything for a simpleton empress? Fortunately, Xie Linzhou had not completely lost his mind. He glared at my legitimate mother, his imperial majesty cold and stern.
Madam Qin, you have overstepped.
My father, who had spent his life ignoring affairs of state to play with birds and paint, suddenly showed a spark of intelligence. He prostrated himself on the ground, weeping and begging for forgiveness. Xie Linzhou ignored him and stepped forward to take the child. To everyone's horror, my sister suddenly let go and threw the baby toward the ground.
I don't want him anymore, Linzhou. I don't like you anymore.
With a gasp, Chuju lunged forward, barely managed to catch the young heir before he hit the ground. Even so, the young heir was still so frightened that he lost consciousness. The veins on Xie Linzhou's neck bulged, and his voice was cold and harsh.
Guards, escort the Empress back to Jiaofeng Palace.
That night, the young heir ran a high fever that wouldn't break. Xie Linzhou ordered the head of the Imperial Academy of Medicine to lead all pediatric specialists to the Prince of Ying's manor. Any medicinal herbs needed would be provided by the palace. 3 days passed before the young heir's fever finally subsided and his condition improved. At the same time, the demands in court to depose the Empress grew increasingly fierce. Some censors even threatened to bash their heads against the pillars in protest, but fortunately, they were held back. Xie Linzhou could no longer play dumb. But how should he handle this matter? To protect my eldest sister would inevitably alienate the imperial family and the court ministers, but to depose her from her position as Empress and move her to the cold palace would betray the eternal love he felt at first sight and the solemn vows they had shared in Jiaofeng Palace over the years. Not just me, but the entire court was waiting to see how Xie Linzhou would choose. Xie Linzhou locked himself in Xuanzheng Hall for the entire night. At dawn, he issued an imperial decree. He deposed my eldest sister from her position as Empress, revoked her Empress's seal and credentials, and demoted her to consort Ying. In consideration of her having borne an imperial prince, she did not have to move out of Jiaofeng Palace. The Empress title that my eldest sister had stepped on my back to obtain was ultimately lost after all. The ministers were still unsatisfied. They insisted that Jiaofeng Palace was the residence for an empress, and that Lady Xi lacked both talent and virtue, possessed neither propriety nor decorum, and had contributed nothing to the state or the imperial lineage, rendering her truly unworthy of residing in Jiaofeng Palace. Overnight, Xie Linzhou seemed to acquire more imperial authority. He let the ministers speak until their throats were dry, before making his final decision.
My imperial decree has already been issued. Do you wish for me to go back on my word?
The ministers quickly claimed they would not dare. The next day, the ministers began submitting petitions for a draft to select a virtuous woman to be the new empress. Xie Linzhou used the excuse that I needed to rest and nurture my pregnancy, declared that the selection of new imperial concubines was temporarily suspended. He couldn't let go of my sister, yet he used me and my child as a shield. I tossed aside the chess pieces and went for a stroll in the garden. Meanwhile, instructing Chen Dao to send all the gifts from the Prince of Ying's estate to Chuju's room. It was no longer as easy for my stepmother to enter the palace as before. My sister threw a tantrum for a few days and went to see Xie Linzhou again, but Xie Linzhou avoided her. Failing to see Xie Linzhou time and time again, my sister threw a major fit just like she used to. It was likely Nanny Wang instigating and plotting behind her back again, but the tactics that had always worked in the past failed this time. After throwing tantrums for a month, my sister finally began to quiet down. Only then did Xie Linzhou slowly start visiting the Jiaofeng Palace again. But I heard that my sister's mental state was growing worse and worse, even showing signs of madness. It seemed the pain of losing her child did indeed cut to the quick. It was mid-autumn festival once again. I was already 6 months pregnant. After taking my pulse, imperial physician he told me there was an 80 to 90% chance it was a prince. I felt a bit relieved. That made things much easier. Xie Linzhou did not host any more palace banquets. He only came to my palace that night to accompany me in the courtyard to worship the moon goddess, and we enjoyed the moon while eating pastries and fruits. As the night grew late, I grew weary and lacked energy. Xie Linzhou carried me back to my room. In my drowsiness, I seemed to hear him say,
A-Yuan, after all these years, you are still the one by my side.
I had no desire to fathom whether he was glad to have me or regretted not having her. So I pulled up the blanket and fell fast asleep. The late stages of pregnancy were somewhat difficult to bear. Chuju and Chuntao kept a very close eye on me, and someone always accompanied me whenever I moved about. One day, when I woke up from my afternoon nap, my sister somehow came to Changle Palace all by herself. Chuju and Chuntao stood nervously by my side, terrified that she might suddenly go mad and hurt me, but she only stared at my swollen belly and left after watching for a short while. The next time she came, she was accompanied by Nanny Wang, Langxiang, and several second-class maids. She opened the food box, presenting a plate of pastries to me.
These are delicious.
I accepted them with a smile, but set them aside without eating any.
Why aren't you eating?
Are you looking down on me? How could I look down on you, sister? I'm just not hungry right now.
I see right through you. You do look down on me. What right does a concubine's daughter? Like you have to look down on me.
My elder sister's face suddenly contorted as she flew into a manic rage. Chuju and Chuntao quickly rushed to stand in front of me, serving tea and saying soothing words to her, but Nanny Wang shoved them both to the floor.
What cheap wenches dare stand in front of her ladyship?
Taking advantage of that split second, my sister rushed forward and swept the plate of pastries off the table, shattering it on the floor. She grabbed my upper arms viciously and shook me.
Are you laughing at me? You even stole my husband.
I struggled to break free, but I didn't expect her to have such immense strength. Hearing the commotion, Erbao and Sanbao rushed in to help free me, but Nanny Wang blocked them. With my arms pinned by my sister, I couldn't muster any strength. Just then, a lock of her hair fell loose. I reached up, grabbed hold of it, and pulled down with all my might. Stung by the pain, she finally let go of me, clutching her head and wailing. I didn't spare her another glance. Chuju and Chuntao shielded me as we retreated into the inner room. Suddenly, a warm gush of fluid rushed out from beneath me. By the time Xie Linzhou rushed over, I was already drenched in sweat, lying on the delivery bed. He called out anxiously from outside the window.
A-Yuan, hold on.
I ignored him, while regretting that I could have avoided this accident. I pushed hard along with the contractions. I have already come this far on this path. I must succeed, and I will succeed. The agonizing pain made my consciousness fade, but in a haze, I could hear a little child calling me, mother, repeatedly. I snapped back to consciousness in an instant, with a slice of ginseng under my tongue. The midwife was anxiously urging me to push. I gripped the bedding beneath me tightly. I returned from the gates of hell. A loud cry of a baby pierced the quiet long night, welcoming the dawn. The midwife said,
"It is an imperial prince."
My mind was finally put at ease, and I let myself sink into a deep sleep. When I woke up again, moonlight was spilling in through the window. A single candle flickered by the bedside. Chuju was dozing off, sitting on the footstool by the bed. Hearing some movement, she turned her head in pleasant surprise.
Your ladyship, you're awake. Would you like something to eat?
There is no rush. Is the baby all right?
He is doing very well. Chuntao and the wet nurse are watching over him in the other room.
I leaned back against the pillows, watching Chuju set the dishes for me, while her mouth didn't stop moving either. This time, the emperor is completely disgusted with the Pepper Chamber Palace.
Running to Changler Palace to throw a tantrum and causing your ladyship to give birth prematurely. The emperor has decreed that Consort Ying must reflect on her actions in the Pepper Chamber Palace.
When was the decree issued?
This morning. Yesterday when the emperor arrived, he asked what had happened, and we explained everything in detail. At the second watch, the emperor returned to Xuanzheng Hall and came back at the third watch.
Chuju handed me a cup of water and added,
"And as for that Nanny Wang, the emperor cursed her as a wicked and ancient servant, who instigated her mistress to stir up trouble, harm a noble consort, and attempt to murder imperial offspring. This afternoon, she was dragged out of the Pepper Chamber Palace and beaten to death."
I fell silent. Nanny Wang, that accomplice? I had planned to deal with her myself, but I didn't expect Xie Linzhou to find out she instigated my eldest sister to stir up trouble and to have her beaten to death directly. But now he will think that my eldest sister, lacking sound judgment, was merely egged on by the nanny to commit those many rude and immoral acts. As time went on, his growing dissatisfaction with my elder sister will fade, and seeing her half-mad state would only fill him with guilt. The guilt of an emperor will undoubtedly gild her with a golden body, but it doesn't matter, since his heart could be divided in two before. It can be divided into even more pieces now. A few days later, someone submitted a memorial requesting the death sentence for noble consort Ying on the grounds of harming the imperial noble consort and plotting against the imperial heir. Xie Linzhou argued that noble consort Ying was pure of heart and that Nanny Wang was the one instigating trouble, noting she had already been beaten to death. Once one person spoke up, many others followed suit. The emperor and his ministers were at a stalemate. I held the infant whom Xie Linzhou had named Xuan'er, amusing him with a rattle drum. When Xie Linzhou arrived, this was the scene that met his eyes.
Your place is still the most comforting.
He took Moore in his arms and teased him. I smiled without saying a word, listening to him complain. I let him vent all the anger he had built up in court before soothing him. Your Majesty, please do not be angry. Your health is what matters most. Moore and I are entirely in your hands. Xie Linzhou was deeply moved.
A-Yuan, let us live a good life together from now on.
I nearly threw up. When we were newlywed, he told me back then that we would live a good life together. I exhausted my mind and planned every step for him for 5 years, only to be demoted from wife to concubine, while my Xuan'er died a tragic death. I don't want to live a good life with him. Can I not live a good life on my own? After a few days of stalemate, seeing that Xie Linzhou adamantly refused to order consort Ying's death, the court officials brought up the imperial draft again. This time, Xie Linzhou did not reject it entirely. For the sake of my eldest sister, he had clashed and reached a stalemate with the ministers several times, which had already severely damaged the bond between ruler and subject. When Xie Linzhou came to Changle Palace again, I offered him a way out. Your Majesty has been on the throne for 5 years. Yet Moore is your only child. The ministers are merely worried about the lack of heirs for your Majesty. Besides, if you insist on refusing, it will also damage the bond between ruler and subject. Xie Linzhou took my hand.
But wouldn't my Ayan feel jealous and sad?
Tears welled up in my eyes. How could I not? But I would hate to see you in a difficult position even more. Xie Linzhou remained silent for a long moment. He pulled my hand and placed it over his heart.
A-Yuan, I know how much you have sacrificed for me. I will never let you down again.
The next day, I received 2 pieces of good news. My Muir was named Crown Prince. One was that Xie Linzhou had agreed to hold the draft. The entire capital was instantly abuzz with excitement, just as the ambitious, high-ranking families were eagerly preparing. Xie Linzhou made another announcement during the morning court. He would only select daughters of officials of the 5th rank and below to enter the palace. Naturally, some objected, but Xie Linzhou said,
You wanted a draft, and I have agreed. What else are you dissatisfied with? Could it be that your concern is not the lack of imperial offspring, as you claim, but rather that you wish to gamble for immense wealth and power?
No one dared to respond. And so, the first draft since Xie Linzhou's ascension to the throne was decided. Having just finished my postpartum confinement, I could not overexert myself. So Xie Linzhou personally checked off a few names from the submitted portraits of the candidates. The ministers were not entirely satisfied, so they selected a few more, bringing the total to 10. Xie Linzhou then granted a special favor, allowing the chosen ladies to celebrate the new year at home before departing for the palace. The 15th day of the first lunar month was an auspicious day. The ladies entered the palace. After granting them all the rank of Baolin, Xie Linzhou seemed to forget about them entirely. In his daily routine, he would either come to Changle Palace or occasionally visit Jiaofeng Palace to see my elder sister. It was said that my sister was now sometimes as innocent as she used to be, and sometimes as mad as a demon. Every time Xie Linzhou visited Jiaofeng Palace, he would remain in low spirits for days. The 10 newly entered Baolins were very well behaved. When they came to my palace to pay their respects, they were very well behaved. It seems they have learned the rules well from their instructing mamas. I gently asked them to be seated and had tea and pastries served. At first, they were still formal and reserved, but seeing how kind and gentle I was, they became less afraid of me. After only a few days, we were sitting together playing card games. I noticed one of them, Lady Zhou, who was lively, sweet, and charming, with watery eyes like a young deer in the forest. Innocent and simple-minded, I asked her, "Do you want to see the emperor?"
Yes, I do.
She replied bluntly, but suddenly remembering that I was the noble consort, she nervously tensed up. "You don't need to fear me. Since you have entered the palace, we are sisters. Naturally, we must all rely on the emperor for our livelihood," I reassured her. That night, after coaxing Moore to sleep, I took off my earrings and instructed Chuju to go and give her a helping hand. A few days later, Lady Zhou was playing on a swing in the imperial garden, her crisp laughter carrying far and wide. That very night, she became the first of the new ladies to attend to the emperor. The next day, May, Xie Linzhou promoted her to Lady of Handsome Fairness and bestowed upon her the Pixiang Palace as her residence. She came to thank me, and I congratulated her with a face full of smiles. After that, Xie Linzhou spent most of his time lingering between her Pixiang Palace and my Chang'e Palace, gradually visiting the Jiaofeng Palace less often. But on a summer afternoon filled with the endless chirping of cicadas, my eldest sister somehow managed to slip out quietly. She happened to see Xie Linzhou boating on the lake with Lady Zhou. Xie Linzhou was picking lotuses and peeling lotus seeds for Lady Zhou, rowing the boat and enjoying the breeze just to win her smile. Things he had done countless times with my eldest sister were now being done with someone else. When they reached the shore, Xie Linzhou carried Lady Zhou off the boat in his arms, only to meet my eldest sister's tear-filled eyes.
Linzhou, didn't you say you only loved me? And only wanted me? Why did you break your word?
Xie Linzhou fell into a rare silence, but he dared not admit his love for my legitimate elder sister had gradually withered away. So, he simply had her escorted back to the Jiaofeng Palace. That night, with consort Zhou in his arms, he called for bathwater 3 times. Hearing of this, I actually felt an inexplicable sense of melancholy, grief for the genuine affection I had once given him. But, sister, do you finally understand what jealousy feels like? Does the pain and anger of being betrayed by the one you love feel the same as what I went through? A husband who could be snatched away by you back then can now be snatched away by someone else. Once a boundary is crossed, it will be crossed countless times more. For my sister's sake, Xie Linzhou crossed the line for the first time by demoting me from wife to concubine. To ease tensions between the emperor and his officials, he crossed it a second time by agreeing to the imperial selection. To vent his frustration over his white moonlight going mad, he crossed it a third time by finding a substitute. I had realized, long ago, that he loved no one but himself. That was why he lived so comfortably. But how could I possibly allow that? Human desire can never be satisfied, whether it is for wealth, power, or women. Even with a substitute for his white moonlight by his side, once the floodgates of desire are open, one will only want more. I understood this truth, and the ministers who wished to send their daughters into the palace understood it even better. From the 5th to the 10th year of Yuanyo, prompted by the petitions of his ministers, Xie Linzhou held 2 more imperial selections. Now, the palace had not only gained 2 more imperial concubines, 5 beautiful ladies, and 7 talented ladies, but also a lady of bright deportment. The former consort Zhou was now a lady of bright demeanor, the head of the 9 consorts. Basking in Xie Linzhou's immense favor, she was arrogant and full of herself. For a period she provoked me both openly and secretly, and even spoke insolently about the Jiaofeng Palace. I simply sent an elderly maid to the Pixiang Palace to re-educate consort Zhou on palace etiquette. Yet, Xie Linzhou neglected her entirely for 3 whole months. It wasn't until the next batch of younger ladies entered the palace that consort Zhou finally reflected and understood her place. Although the Jiaofeng Palace no longer held its former glory, there would never be another mistress of the Jiaofeng Palace. After that, Lady Zhou became that pure, innocent, and naive consort Zhou once again. Even as more and more women gradually entered the palace later on, she remained Xie Linzhou's most favored consort Zhou. I had not chosen the wrong person back then, and I was quite satisfied. In the first year or 2, Xie Linzhou still frequently visited the Jiaofeng Palace to see my elder sister. But after losing her child and suffering Xie Linzhou's betrayal, her mental state became increasingly unstable. Sometimes she was as quiet as water, but other times she was driven to madness. Once the young and delicate draft girls entered the palace, with new faces to coax and accompany him every day, Xie Linzhou gradually stopped setting foot in the Jiaofeng Palace. As for my Chang'e Palace, Xie Linzhou did come often. When he came, I welcomed him with joy, talking, chatting, and playing with the young child at our knees, just like an affectionate couple in the ordinary world. When he did not come, I was even more at ease, playing with my Moor and reading books on my own. I cannot say how happy I was. Xie Linzhou often said that he felt most relaxed here with me. I smiled in silence. He had either just come from another consort's palace, or was about to turn around to boat on the lake and admire flowers with this beauty or that consort. Coming to my place was merely because he was tired of the beauties fighting for his favor. By the time Xie Linzhou held his 4th imperial draft, Moor was already 10 years old. He studied under the great scholar, Master Ge, and learned martial arts from the heir of Prince Ying. He respected his teachers and valued their teaching, acted with propriety and restraint, and was magnanimous and polite. He received unanimous praise from both the court and the public. After all, over these 10 years, there was no telling how many women Xie Linzhou had favored, yet not a single one had ever become pregnant. At first, Xie Linzhou did not mind. Moor was naturally intelligent, composed, and sensible. To have such a son was enough, but not wanting children and being unable to have them are 2 different things. As time Time went on and no consort became pregnant. He spent more and more of his time lingering in the imperial harem, until one night at midnight, he suddenly went to the long silent Jiaofeng palace. The next morning, upon returning to Xuanzheng Hall, he immediately decreed that all servants in the Pepper Chamber Palace be beaten to death. The Pepper Chamber Palace was sealed and locked, with all entry and exit forbidden. Everyone in the Xie household was thrown into the imperial prison to await sentencing. Oh, it must be because what my second legal sister did many years ago, when she infected him with the love sickness goo, was finally discovered. Nurtured with the blood of a southern Yunnan woman, the parasite grows to maturity in 3 months. Once planted inside the husband, only the woman who raised the parasite can ever bear his children. A chilling silence fell over the palace. Those who usually vied fiercely for his favor had all gone quiet these past few days. Yet, Xie Linzhou was busier than ever. Aside from holding court, discussing state affairs, and reviewing memorials, he neither visited any consort's palace, nor summoned anyone for the night. While I was keeping more company as he practiced calligraphy, Chuju came in and whispered to me that my legal mother had been moved to the inner prison. In the dead of night, I disguised myself and went to the inner prison with an eunuch. My legal mother's hair was disheveled, though her clothes were still relatively clean. Seeing me, she lunged forward as if I were her savior.
The Empress wasn't implicated, was she? What on earth did the Emperor lock up our entire Xie family for?
I stared at her for a long moment before letting out a soft chuckle. Does mother truly not know? You treated the Emperor as my legal sister's personal possession. Have you forgotten even the evil deeds you committed? Just as my legal mother was about to argue, she suddenly recalled something. Her face turned pale in an instant, and she began to tremble all over.
No, that is impossible. The Grand Master said no one would ever find out.
I paced slowly outside the prison bars. Under the wide heaven, all land belongs to the Emperor. Southern Yunnan is also the Emperor's territory. How could that Grand Master you knew be the only one? Besides, it is merely the love sickness Gao. I could easily find 10 or 8 more of them for you if needed. Back then, after my legal sister lost her child, I became pregnant with more. My legal mother often came to Changle Palace, using threats and promises to force me to give more to my legal sister. It is me, intentionally used my words to provoke my legal mother. If you have the ability, mother, make it so that in the Emperor's harem, only my eldest sister can get pregnant. It is me who sent someone, while my first mother was secretly searching for secret medicine, to pose as a goo master from southern Dayan and sell her the Yusi goo. As for where the Yusi goo came from, during the first few years of my marriage to Xie Linzhou, when I secured his rear and raised provisions for his army, he was not the only person I saved. My first mother was struck as if by lightning. She lunged forward in an instant, only to be blocked by the iron bars.
It was you, you wretched wench. If I had known, I should have drowned you when you were a child. You have ruined my Yinger. Oh, my Yinger. The noble and esteemed Empress, you rotten-hearted, wicked wench.
I looked at her coldly. Mother, you are mistaken. The one who ruined my eldest sister was clearly you. If not for you, how could someone as simple as my eldest sister covet her brother-in-law and insist on becoming the Empress? If not for you, how could she have treated the Emperor as her personal possession, not even allowing Xuan'er to receive a single embrace from his father? If not for you, how would Nanny Wang and Langxiang have dared to ignore my pounding on the door for help, refusing to release even a single imperial physician? How would my Xuan'er have died from a severe illness without treatment on that rainy night? My first mother's lips trembled, her face pale, and fear finally appeared in her eyes.
You are taking revenge on me. Revenge on my Yinger. What are you planning to do? What do you want to do to Yinger?
I looked at my first mother, who used to stand high above, always looking at me as if I were a mere plaything. She desperately wanted to know what I would do to her Yinger. Seeing that, I remained silent. She fell to her knees, begging me to spare my eldest sister, tears and mucus flowing down her face, with nearly half of the long-harbored resentment in my chest finally venting out. I finally felt a sense of relief. Back then, when my Xuan'er died in my arms, no one could understand my pain. With a wave of my hand, an attendant carrying poisonous wine stepped forward and placed the tray right before my first mother. I suppose mother doesn't want to experience it either. With that said, I turned and walked out of the inner prison. Waking up the next morning, Chuju told me that my legal mother had committed suicide in prison. She had left a letter, written in blood before she died, stating that the first meeting between the Emperor and the Empress was entirely orchestrated by her, that the Empress's intense possessiveness over the Emperor was also due to Nanny Wang, whom she had instructed to instigate the Empress night and day to cast the love curse. It was all because she desperately wanted to help the Empress secure a lifetime of glory, which is why I resorted to this plan. She took all the blame upon herself, only hoping that for the sake of the Empress's innocence and her deep devotion to the Emperor. He would not implicate the Empress. I fell silent for a long time. There was joy and relief, but also melancholy and sadness. I wondered if my elder sister had learned of this news yet. Up until now, my elder sister has lost everyone who truly loved her. A child, without protection, has no right to remain innocent and naive. When Moore returned from school and saw me still lost in thought and asked me what was wrong, I stroked his head, and as I smiled, tears began to fall. Mother is fine. I just miss your elder brother.
Don't cry, Mother. Moore will stay by your side in place of Big Brother.
I stopped my tears and smiled with genuine comfort. Moore, you don't have to shoulder your brother's responsibilities. As long as you live a good life, both mother and your brother will be happy. A few days later, Xie Linzhou issued an imperial edict declaring that Lady Tai, the Empress's mother, had used insidious means to harm imperial offspring and had been bestowed with poison. The court and the public were in an uproar, and rumors spread like wildfire. That very night, father submitted a memorial from the prison admitting his negligence, expressing in fear and trepidation that he had failed to manage his household and instruct his wife, leaving him with no dignity to remain in the imperial court. He begged the emperor to allow him to resign and return to his hometown. However, Xie Linzhou stripped both my father and elder brother of all their official posts, but he allowed father to keep his empty title of Duke Chenjin, and their residence was not confiscated either. I speculated that, perhaps for my eldest sister, Xie Linzhou still had one last shred of tenderness left, but Moore was already 10 years old. It was time to start preparing for certain things. Ever since Xie Linzhou found out he had been poisoned with Giyu, he had turned southern Yunnan upside down. He finally found the great shaman of the Miao people, but the great shaman said too much time had passed. The gu poison had seeped too deep, and it would be very difficult for him to father any more children. Devastated by the blow, Xie Linzhou began to put his blind faith in the secret arts of alchemists. The once magnificent and majestic Taiji Palace was now filled with foul smoke every day. Xie Linzhou, who used to be quite diligent, began attending court only 2 days out of every 5. As for important state affairs, he simply left them to a few key ministers to handle as they saw fit. Before long, the court officials noticed the emperor's change, and complaints began to mount. I didn't intend to pay any attention to this. After all, Moore would be Xie Linzhou's only child in this lifetime. When Moore grew a bit older and gained more experience, that would be the perfect time for Xie Linzhou to abdicate. But of all things, he should never, ever have listened to those charlatans and tried to use Moore's heartblood to refine an elixir to cure his gu poison. And now, if he could just die a bit sooner, it would be a blessing for Moore. I invited the Duchess of Zhao, the Duchess of Zhu, and the wife of the General of Chariots and Cavalry to Chang'e Palace. We spent the afternoon chatting and laughing. Their husbands had fought alongside Xie Linzhou ever since his days in the princely residence, accompanying him through countless open and hidden dangers. But seeing how I, his first wife, and Xuan'er were treated, how could they not feel a chill in their hearts and start looking for a way out? What is more, though Moore was young, he was composed, polite, and gracious, already showing the makings of a wise ruler. The night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, under the full moon, was meant for family reunion. Yet, the maddened Xie Linzhou wanted my Moore's life. When I burst into Taiji Palace, Xie Linzhou was inhaling 5 minerals powder. Through the swirling smoke, his thin and pale body looked like an evil spirit. He looked up at me, his eyes unfocused. It took him quite a while to recognize me.
A-Yuan, what are you doing here?
I am here to ask your majesty to die. Xie Linzhou looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time, and as if it took him forever to understand the meaning of my words.
A-Yuan, go back now, and I can pretend nothing happened.
I stood before him, looking down at him. I cannot go back. Ever since Moore was brought here by you, I could no longer go back. He suddenly stood up, grabbing my face.
How dare you?
I pushed him away with force, and he was unexpectedly knocked to the ground by my push. He had actually become this weak. I ordered Erbao and Sanbao to take a squad of imperial guards to find Moore and bring him back to Chang'e Palace immediately upon finding him. As for Taoist Master Feng, who was kneeling and trembling on the side, he was dragged out directly by the guards. Xie Linzhou, ever since I married you, I have planned and exhausted myself for you at every step. Yet, when you ascended the throne, you crowned my eldest sister as Empress. You are the Emperor, and you slighted and demeaned me. I had resigned myself to my fate, but my Xuan'er was killed by you and my eldest sister, who cared only for your love and ignored your duties. Killing my Xuan'er was not enough, and you actually want my Moore's life as well. Since that is the case, I might as well ask you to die first. Xie Linzhou's face twisted with rage, and he wanted to say something but only mumbled and spluttered, unable to make anything clear. In the tea he loved to drink daily, I had slipped a certain medicine, one that can thicken a person's blood. Originally, it would have taken a few years, for stroke symptoms to gradually appear, but he courted death by taking whooshy powder, so I simply supplied it in abundance. It has only been a few months, and the medicine has already taken effect. In a fit of rage, he grabbed everything around him and threw it far away, vainly trying to make noise to attract the guards on duty outside. I knelt down and held his arm, as gentle as I had been all these years. Your Majesty, take a rest. Unless I call out, no one will come. That year, you were trapped in Yun City. I pawned my dowry to raise funds for provisions and fodder, and led the estate guards and hired mercenaries across 1,000 miles to deliver them to you. You were not the only person I saved. You are an ungrateful, cold-blooded wolf. You forgot my sacrifices and disregarded my devotion. But some people remember. Many people remember. Xie Linzhou remembered that the one on duty tonight was the heir of the Duke of Zhao. During the Battle of Yun City, the Duke of Zhao and his heir were both trapped in Yun City with him. Jiang Shuying was not wrong. She had indeed saved many people. Aside from Duke Zhao, there are also Duke Zhu, the general of agile cavalry, and the general who guards the north. With a sharp pain in his mind and a gasp for air, Xie Linzhou fainted. When he woke up again, Xie Linzhou found himself unable to speak or move. Jiang Shuying was holding a scroll of imperial decree, examining it very carefully. Seeing him wake up, she smiled gently and held the decree up for him to see. Look at my handwriting. Is it good? Xie Linzhou took a quick look, and it was exactly the same as the handwriting he had used for his imperial brush annotations over the years. Rage surged in his chest, unable to catch his breath. His vision went black, and he lost consciousness again. Seeing Xie Linzhou faint once more, I happily took out the imperial seal of the state and stamped it down squarely and firmly. The Prince of Ying's heir, the Duke of Zhao, and the Duke of Ying had all entered the palace. As the Crown Prince's grand tutor, Old Master Gu, was also present to witness this. Director Shu, who was by Xie Linzhou's side, personally retrieved a scroll of imperial decree from the secret compartment of the dragon bed. The decree clearly stated,
Ever since we were poisoned by Lady Qin, our imperial body has been ailing for a long time. Should any misfortune occur, the crown prince shall ascend the throne immediately. The noble consort shall be honored as Empress Dowager, attending to state affairs from behind the curtain. The Prince of Ying, the Duke of Zhao, the Duke of Zhu, the General of Chariots and Cavalry, and the General of the Guarding North are appointed as Ministers of Regency to assist the Emperor in becoming familiar with state affairs as soon as possible, so that he may personally rule and manage affairs at an early date.
When everything was settled, the first light of morning appeared. The Duke of Zhao and his group had already left to prepare for the Crown Prince's accession. Only the panting Xie Linzhou and I were left in the Taiji Palace. His eyes were filled with monstrous hatred and anger as he glared at me fiercely. At this moment, as the dust settled, the stifling oppression in my chest was completely swept away. For the first time in the more than 10 years of being married to Xie Linzhou, I felt so light and relaxed. Even my words of farewell were spoken with a smile. Xie Linzhou, goodbye forever. This extravagant and decadent Taiji Palace could be left for Xie Linzhou, the retired emperor. The Daming Palace was quite nice. The world is bright and clear, which is the meaning of daming. It was just right for my pure and noble Moor to live in. After the Mid-Autumn Festival in the 15th year of Yuanyo, Moor formally ascended the throne. I also moved to the Chengqing Palace and became the Empress Dowager. Meanwhile, on a winter night, Xie Linzhou passed away quietly, although I was very reluctant. For the sake of Moore's smooth transition of power, his funeral was still held with great grandeur. Regarding his posthumous title, the court officials in the front hall argued endlessly. I was only happy that there was no one left in the world who could harm my child. On the last day of the 15th year of Yuanyo, the sky was gloomy, and it was about to snow. I went to Jiaofeng Palace. The palace gates were no longer as grand as they once were. Most of the red lacquer had peeled away. I pushed the doors open ahead of me, and the creaking sound only heightened the desolation. I walked through the courtyard, which wasn't even cleared of fallen leaves and dead branches, and entered the spacious and open main hall. My eldest sister's hair was disheveled, and her clothes, though somewhat worn, were relatively neat. She sat blankly on a prayer mat, gazing with vacant eyes at the overcast sky. The maid serving her said that what my sister did most often now every day was stare at the birds flying in the sky. I waved my hand to dismiss everyone around me and casually found a prayer mat to sit on as well. Counting carefully, I hadn't seen my sister for over 10 years. Instigated by her mother and Nanny Wang, she had cast a lovesick curse on Xie Linzhou. Once discovered by Xie Linzhou, she was completely discarded and detested. Since then, Jiaofeng Palace, once the most bustling place in the palace, became a cold palace. Here, my sister drifted between madness and lucidity, losing her mind and regaining it over and over. Until today, sister, Xie Linzhou is dead. Do you understand what death means now? She didn't seem to hear me speaking, still staring at the sky without moving an inch. Father spends his days at home drinking himself to oblivion, and our brother has gone far away. As for your mother, she has been dead for several years too, because your attempt to curse Xie Linzhou was discovered. She didn't want to experience the pain of losing a child that I once felt. I stood up and saw what seemed to be the glisten of tears in her eyes. From childhood to adulthood, everyone said you were innocent and pure of heart. At first, I thought so too. Even though whenever you were displeased as a child, I had to kneel in the ancestral hall and have my palms whipped. I never held a grudge against you, but you and my husband. Even that, I could let go. Yet Xuan'er died because of you and Xie Linzhou, and you felt no remorse at all. My Xuan'er, whom I held in the palm of my hand, was to you just a child who played with you. His death meant nothing to you. It wasn't as important as your romance with Xie Linzhou. So, are you truly innocent and pure, or do you know perfectly well that innocence can help you get whatever you want? I walked over to my sister, looking down at her face, still beautiful but empty. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is, sister, from the moment Xuan'er died in my arms, I have been looking forward to this day. Everyone who truly loved you is dead. Can you still remain as innocent as you were when Xuan'er passed? You shall stay here in the Pepper Chamber Palaces and watch me live a peaceful, happy life. The heavy snow rustled as it fell, covering all traces of the past. When I reached the palace gates and looked back, the snow was so heavy that my sister's figure inside was no longer visible. I pushed open the doors and stepped out, leaving that Pepper Chamber Palace which Xie Linzhou had once promised me, and where I once thought we would grow old together in deep love. Far, far behind me, Moore will grow up very soon, and he will have his own wife and children. I will advise him never to betray the devotion of the one beside him. In the long life ahead, I will enjoy the flowers in spring and the moon in autumn, listen to the summer rain, and appreciate the winter snow. I will live my life well on my own. From now on, the world is wide, and I shall wander through it in peace.